All right. Hey, everybody. Misty Williams here from Healing Rosie. And I am thrilled about the conversation I'm going to have today with Ryan Sternagel. Did I get it right? Did I say it right? I did.
Accents on the A, Sternagel.
Sternagel. Yes, something. There's going to be a quiz after, and I think I have a D so far. But we're gonna talk a little bit about the journey that Ryan had with his son, who was diagnosed with cancer at around a year old. And I think, Ryan, you told me that he was born with it, or perhaps you suspect that he was born with cancer.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
no, yeah, it's we discovered it 11 days. Well, he was diagnosed 11 days before his first birthday, but most likely it's something he was born with. Yeah.
Yeah. So all of us, I think, at this stage, have either known someone in our not immediate circle who has cancer, or certainly we have someone in our immediate circle, an aunt, an uncle, grandparents, parents, and God forbid, some of us have even had our children diagnosed with cancer. And I recently watched my childhood youth pastor get a cancer diagnosis and ultimately die. Which was very hard for my family, by the way, not just because he was in, this really special role for us as kids, but because we'd known him for so long. These people get woven into the fabric and storyline of your own lives. And I remember right after the diagnosis, they decided they wanted to go the alternative route and took him down to Mexico. They pulled $20,000 out of their house and did the procedure. And they actually think on the other side of it that it hastened his death, which is devastating on so many levels. I have friends who are right now going through chemo. I have a friend who's got, I think, a form of leukemia. And he's posting about it on Facebook. Just such a scary journey. And the hardest part about this, and I've actually watched friends go through this, and I'm sure this is probably something that you and your wife had to confront, Ryan, and people that are watching can relate to as well. When you get that diagnosis, it so hits you in the face, and there's so much fear that accompanies a diagnosis of cancer, any kind of cancer, that the way that you make decisions really isn't grounded in how you would perhaps make this choice if you didn't have so much fear accompanying it. And that fear can push you both ways. That fear can push you into the conventional treatment side, like I have to do chemo and all these therapies that my doctor is telling me I have to do. It could also push you, like it did for my youth pastor's family, push you in the other side. You have so much fear that you're going to go, completely the other way. And, on the other side of it all, hindsight's 2020, but we don't have the benefit of that when we're making these decisions. So Ryan, I'm super excited about the Anti-Cancer Revolution event that you're hosting coming up. And I love kind of the slant and the angle that you're taking on this conversation. And I'd love for you just to start us out with some background. You dealt with this with your son, and you guys had quite the journey as you walked your son through to total remission. So take it away.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you say, there is a lot of fear, and just, foretelling of a bit of the story. We had the additional fear of knowing that, when it's your kid diagnosed, you find out very quickly that you don't even really own your kid in that regard. Medical decisions of, are we going to go conventional, or are we going to go alternative, or whatever? At least not participating in the conventional medical system isn't really an option for most parents, or things get really ugly and controlling. And so that was, and we knew that going into it. So that was like another, layer of weirdness. And, it was fear in the beginning, just kind of complicating our decision-making process and all that, all that good stuff. But
you guys actually had the experience of, just to kind of give context for those that don't know your story, you had the experience of DHS getting involved, right?
Yeah, well, it was called CPS back then,
Okay.
in that state, but
Yeah.
yeah, Child Protective Services. But yeah, it's, and again, I should back up to what the story actually was, but yeah, we wanted a second opinion, and that was enough to get the government involved, so to speak. And things got really ugly and controlling from there. So it's,
Yeah, I can imagine.
definitely an eye-opening experience. But yeah, I mean, to back it up, my wife and I, before our first son Ryder was born, we're already getting pretty, naturally health conscious, all the stuff that we hear about on all these different events and podcasts and so on and so forth. You know, we were getting into all of it. We were getting rid of chemicals, eating organic, getting rid of EMFs, just trying to be as healthy as we could, especially knowing that we were going to be trying to have a kid pretty soon. And then we had Ryder, and things were great for the first year, just, you know, kind of typical new parents finding their way through. And about a month before his first birthday, my wife noticed a lump in his back when she was breastfeeding him. And, you know, it wasn't huge. He had to be bent over in the right way, but, you know, I could feel it when he was bent over in that way. And it was obviously concerning. So we took him into his pediatrician, and basically got brushed off. It was my wife in there originally, and when we were headed in there was like a few other things that started adding up for us that just, you know, by themselves were kind of weird, but now all together with this big lump in his back were, you know, getting to be pretty concerning. This was again a month before his first birthday, and he not even walking, but he wasn't crawling. He was barely even pulling himself up. He had stopped growing at about 6 months. He was born in like the 90 something percentile. And at that point, I think he was down into the 20s or so, and it got lower than that. But yeah, my wife came home from that first appointment kind of feeling like a bad parent, and that, you know, she had been referred to a physical therapist to teach him how to crawl, and an occupational therapist to teach him how to eat, because actually that was the other thing, is he couldn't handle solid food, so he'd still been just purely breastfed at that point, and she was also kind of made to feel bad for just breastfeeding her kid for some reason. So yeah, I don't know, it was like a brush off, but that lasted, like, we never went to either of those appointments. It was, you know, a day later we were back on the phone, like, you know, no, can we come back in? Something's clearly, you know, just not right here, and he doesn't need physical therapy. So we got back into see them. They ended up referring us to a hospital. We got referred to what we thought was a doctor, who turned out to be a physician's assistant. And he took an x-ray, which all that showed was that Ryder was constipated, which was something we knew, which was also another, like, he had been super regular, you know, 8 baby poos a day sort of thing, his whole first year. And then within these past 2 weeks, he had just stopped pooping. So that was, you know, another thing. But he took an x-ray and said he didn't see anything, and took some blood work. Blood work was fine enough, and told us to come back in 6 weeks if the lump right next to his spine was still there. Again, that, you know, that didn't jive with us. We got back on the phone, just really, you know, no, can we see an actual doctor? Ended up seeing, I think they put us in with an orthopedic doctor, because they were kind of tying it to the not crawling thing. And an orthopedic doctor saw us, and she had a nurse with us, and by this time, you know, we had my wife was doing the Dr. Google thing, and she had already pretty much diagnosed Ryder with neuroblastoma, which is what it ended up being. But they were, you know, we got in there to see them. No, it couldn't be neuroblastoma. There, you know, would be this and that going on. And we finally talked him into getting an ultrasound, just to basically placate us, if nothing else. And then when we got the ultrasound, it was, oh, okay, you know, that there is some sort of mass in there, and now we need to get an MRI. And then, you know, we got the MRI. 45 minutes goes by, an hour goes by, an hour and a half, and then I think it was almost 2 hours later that the doctor and the nurse came back in, and they were they both had, you know, tears. Yeah, they were both crying. And you know, we'll never forget the words that came out of their mouths. They said the lump you felt in your son's back was just the tip of the iceberg. Yeah, so it turned out that it was stage 4 neuroblastoma. He had a massive mass tumor that was bigger than his kidneys inside of and growing out of his spine. It's cancer of the nervous system. 2 secondary tumors, and they had all metastasized, some into his hip bones and some into like the spinal cord itself. So yeah, being first-time parents, and you know, not and this was again 11 days before his first birthday, so not exactly what you expect.
Yeah. So I can't even wrap my head around what that must have been like for you as parents, and also knowing that if you hadn't advocated so hard that that could have gone undiagnosed and been ultimately untreatable. So what happened? You guys, I hope that the doctor apologized.
That physician's assistant, because he was like the one that really blocked it in the first place. The doctors were a little better about, getting us in. But we saw him in the hallway and he said something about like, yeah, I might not have been as aggressive as I should have been or something like
Yeah,
that.
maybe not.
Yeah. But no, and it's like, doubling down on following your intuition, especially, women's intuition. My wife was the one that really, really bulldogged that thing down and, getting that diagnosis, because come to find out afterwards that, this particular cancer inside of the spine, it doesn't get caught a lot. And those kids get paralyzed or die or become incontinent or some combination of those things.
Yeah.
And, every medical professional that sees these scans today is blown away that Ryder's not only alive, but just walking, because it really should have paralyzed him at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that obviously explained why it wasn't really using his legs. But yeah, I forget what the actual question was, but yeah,
So where did you guys go from
yeah,
there?
where
So
do we go from
this
there?
diagnosis, the doctor's telling you, I mean, it sounds pretty grim. Stage 4 is like, very advanced. So
Yeah, it was advanced, and we were already pretty, again, natural health, alternative medicine inclined. We'd seen a few, I hate using the word alternative, but it's what everybody knows, but alternative cancer documentaries, it's Brzezinski documentary, a couple Gerson documentaries, just, so we're pretty well informed of at least where to start looking around. And, but then we also knew there was a massive tumor inside of our son, and we didn't really know exactly what we were going to do to shrink it in time. Holistically, we had a lot of alternative people telling us, no chemo, no way, no how. But then they really couldn't give us a really good answer on how we were going to shrink it. But then on the other hand, the conventional folks were just saying no to anything we suggested that had to do with like actual healing. But they did have something that was pretty well assured to shrink the tumor. But then just also, the thought of that huge bag of poison going into your 1-year-old is,
right. Scary.
not pleasant either. So yeah, we did actually take him home. So we agreed to getting a central line put in, because, chemotherapy definitely was on the table for us, and we knew there was this government control option, but we were still trying to, weigh our options and just make the most informed decision and all that stuff. So we agreed to get the line put in, but, because if we did decide to go through it, then we would be ready right then. And then also because, we were finding out about intravenous vitamin C and even low dose chemotherapy, IPT, the insulin potentiated therapy. We were considering that as an option. We got the line placed, we got the biopsy, and then we actually took him home over the protest of, a million different doctors and social workers and nurses and so on and so forth. But we, wanted to make the best possible decision. So we, immediately started calling around to all sorts of different cancer clinics all over the world, different other mainstream hospitals to try to get second opinions, all that stuff. And then that actually, that whole thing didn't last very long, because I don't think it was that night, but I think it was the night after. Keep on meaning to ask Teddy, my wife, what exactly night. I think it was the night after. But yeah, he was sleeping in bed with us, and he woke up with like, I forget what the temperature was, but it was 100 something. He was burning up, and we felt the heat just radiating off of him, and then all of a sudden he started puking everywhere, and we didn't know what was going on outside of our son had just been diagnosed with cancer, and now he's got this crazy fever, and it just looks like the worst possible thing could be happening, right? So it was, we had all this courage and muster to get out of the hospital, and then all of a sudden it's 90 miles an hour back to the hospital trying to figure out what's going on. And turned out that when they put that line in, they'd given him I won't say they, but he had received a staph infection in his bloodstream as a result.
My God.
Yeah, as a result of that procedure. So at that point, you know, it was like we were trying to figure out how to brave, you know, a cancer diagnosis holistically or potentially holistically, but you know, a staph infection that could kill him within a couple hours. That was, you know, so he was on IV antibiotics at that point. We were in the hospital, and that's like a, you know, multiple week procedure, not procedure, but course of treatment sort of thing. And so at that point, you know, all of our plans of going, you know, across the border or, you know, to another country at all these different clinics, or just even trying to figure any of that stuff out, that was all kind of out of the window. And we still had this massive tumor to deal with. So we consented to a round of chemotherapy at that point, but also wanted to do everything we could in the meantime to protect him from, you know, as much of the damage as we could. Also, we were starting to implement at that point already a lot of therapeutic supplements and treatments and all that sort of thing. So I mean, like literally in the hospital, we had our had our juicer set up, big, you know, one of those big Berkey water filters. We had like a closet full of supplements. Gosh, just like a little rice cooker. We were making like steaming vegetables on and all this stuff. And yeah, I don't think the nurses had ever seen anything like us. But yeah, so we, you know, a lot of these kids get a feeding tube put in when they're, or even adults, when they're just so emaciated, the treatment has just completely destroyed them and they can't eat. We saw that tube as a tool, and we're like, no, we want that thing in now. And that was actually a really big argument, just getting a tube placed. And they're like, well, he looks fine. And we're like, yeah, we want to keep him looking fine. It's actually, yeah, that it actually got kind of heated just trying to get a stupid tube.
And your thought was, we want to start giving him the nutrition.
Yeah, and it's a 1-year-old. We can, you know, we were trying to syringe stuff into his mouth, and he was actually being kind of a trooper about it. Some of one particular supplement, one supplement in particular, Healin, was something we still use today, but it's one of the first things he ever had, and one of the worst things you ever taste. But it's also, there's a whole ton of research behind it, and we're trying to syringe that into his mouth. And he was, you know, taking it, but I think he could just kind of tell something was up, and he needed to go along with whatever we were
normal.
trying to do. But,
right.
But yeah, you know, we knew that wasn't a sustainable solution, so we were pushing for the tube, and so we finally got it. And yeah, we were just, you know, he went from never having breast milk, or excuse me, only ever having breast milk, to you know, all of a sudden getting all this juice and supplements slammed down his tube, to immediately after having never had like a children's Motrin or anything like that, all of a sudden, you know, chemotherapy. But you know, he was always the best looking kid on the oncology floor, so to speak. And you know, they're wheeling around their tray of like Oreos and Cheerios and just candy, and we're watching all the other kids get it. You know, meanwhile we're, like I said, making our concoctions and just pumping them full of all the God-given nutrition we could. And
so great.
Yeah, it went on like that for several weeks. And you know, and then at that point, it was kind of made clear to us after the fact that, you know, we would need to continue on the standard of care, or else there would be, you know, problems legally. And it got to the point where it was like, I don't know, the story kept changing on how much was going to be enough and when could we stop and all this stuff. So we ended up moving, moving states to, we're in Utah now, Park City, Utah. And at that point, it's not like Utah is just some bastion of medical freedom, but it is more personal liberty inclined and more, you know, but still natural health friendly. And at that point, yeah, we were about halfway through what the standard of care said the Ryder should have had. But we the new team, Ryder was so far along, like, you know, further than he should have been, that the new team was actually able, you know, they were open to a wait and see approach, as they called it, and as we called it too. You know, didn't say we're just stopping for good no matter what, but let's see if that happened to have been enough from their perspective anyway. Maybe that was enough chemo for him, and he doesn't need the whole, you know, course that the other kids get. So anyway, that was 5 years ago, and we you know, we just continued to go hard on all the supplements and energy medicine and intravenous therapies. And positive thinking and positive affirmations and just all that good stuff. And yeah, the older he's gotten, the more we've gotten to incorporate just that he's been able to go along with. And yeah, it's been pretty cool. And so yeah, the today, secondary tumors are gone, the metastasis is gone. The big one is a small fraction of what it was to start, and it's I'm pretty comfortable calling it scar tissue at this point. It's done a couple little, is that growing? But then there's also the possibility for some benign cells hanging out in there that aren't really cancerous, that neuroblastoma can turn into. But yeah, it hasn't really done much to speak of for a few years now. So we're, I feel pretty good about saying he's most of the way out of the woods.
Yeah. I can't even imagine what that had to be like for you and Teddy going through that with your very first baby.
Yeah. It's I like, and it's just like the something to be said for mindset, because it was really rough. And there was there were dark times for me, for Teddy, for the whole, for our whole family, our parents, all that stuff. But we definitely did try to keep, it's almost like being so tuned into kind of the, I don't know, the woo-woo side of healing pretty early on, and kind of knowing that your energy is contagious, and finding out, like reading books like The Biology of Belief and stuff like that. And, just how your thoughts can even affect your biology, but then also your energy can affect you. So it's like, we were kind of into that sort of thing as well. And like knowing that it was actually kind of it messed with your mind, really, to know that like, this is something you should just be devastated about, and really feeling bad about. And like, there might be something wrong with you if you're not like really sad. But then on the other hand, knowing that like, you've got to be projecting the best possible energy to your kid at all times. So that is, what we tried to do. And we had our breakdown moments, of course, but then there was like the other part of it was, I don't know. It was almost like I was too busy, or we were too busy to be, to really let ourselves dwell in that for too long. Like we knew there was too much to do. Finding out about all this, all these natural healing modalities, and other people that had beat cancer all naturally, or had a 0% chance by conventional standards, and they used some conventional, but then a whole bunch of alternative stuff, and ended up beating it. And here they are 10 years later. So we clung on to those stories pretty early on, and it was always kind of like if that guy can do it,
Right.
so can we. Like, we're going to do that too. So yeah, there was kind of the one doom and gloom angle of it, but then the other, like, there'll be time to be sad later. Right now, there's a whole lot of stuff that we're finding out about that we got to figure out how to do.
Right.
And so that was kind of the MO for the first couple of years. I'd say, going back, if I could change anything, it would be, we had the positive mentality thing going for us, but did not have the self-care that we try to preach to
Right.
parents and caregivers. The joke is that we looked more like the cancer patients than Ryder did.
Yeah.
That first year we weren't sleeping much, we weren't eating much, and I guess I still haven't gotten a lot of sleep these past 5 years, just trying to, dig our way out of debt and all this stuff. But there's a difference between, even just going back to mindset, there's a difference between not getting a lot of sleep and being in like a really just kind of pressure, oh my gosh, how am I going to get all this done mentality versus, we're going to get this done kind of mentality. So,
Sure. Well, that's
yeah.
one of the things that comes up for me as you're telling your story is, how did you guys manage all of this? I mean, I'm assuming you had a career. Was your wife working at the time? And I'm sure that the costs of all of this was just astronomical. You're trying to like kind of keep a few parts of your life together that are helping you to be able to take care of your son. But then taking care of your son seems like it was more than a full-time job.
Yeah, and thank God my wife had, we had, she was working while she was pregnant with Ryder, and it was always pretty sure that it was going to be the plan to pull her out after. We weren't entirely sure, but it became clear, and that's actually kind of one of the, I don't know, if we go back to another common question is what do you think caused it? And she was under a lot of stress in her old job. It was very, one of those like bosses trying to make her quit so they don't have to pay maternity leave type of things, and really got to her. And then finding out about the just stress correlation to cancer, even adults, and you think about that during a child's formation. And it's also a very tech heavy job with lots of EMF and so on and so forth. So but anyway, we had pulled her out of that while Ryder was pregnant earlier than we were, excuse me, while Teddy was pregnant earlier than we were planning on. And she had just never gone back to work. So she was already full-time caregiver to Ryder. But it was, that was like 4 full-time jobs, trying to do all this stuff. And so we had, we had a lot of family support. We leveraged, a lot of, friend and family network support. It's something that I, constantly am trying to tell other parents and even, people going through cancer. Everything is, there's very little that like you really need to be doing yourself. It's kind of, I read that, that Tim Ferriss book, The 4-Hour Workweek, very early on. And it's all about, it's kind of all about how to, get out of your day job and create your own thing and blah, blah, blah. But it's also kind of about outsourcing your, responsibilities and that sort of thing. So, if there was something that someone else could be doing for us, we weren't bashful in asking them to do it, or just accepting help is the other thing. Like a lot of people want to help, but even when you're going through cancer, it's kind of a natural tendency to be, no, like I'm good. I think that's kind of the Western mentality, like, how we're raised is you got to be completely self-reliant or there's something wrong with you.
Right.
And I did have, a lot of pride around always being able to take care of myself and not really needing any help. But it's my son's life on the line. I made the decision very early on to let go of any sort of pride or insecurity, on the other hand, around asking for or accepting help. So, we took that to the extreme. Like I, did the whole, another thing in that book is like, outsourcing your day job. So I literally had like I found a guy in the Philippines I kind of trained him on a lot of the proposal data entry stuff that I didn't really need to be the one doing. That freed up a whole ton of time for me. But then of course we had to pay him. That's where fundraising came in. Teddy and I were a young couple, just, first jobs out of college, that sort of thing. We we had just sold a townhome that we had for a few years, and that gave us a few $1,000 to, it's kind of a runway to start. But we raised tens of thousands of dollars for Ryder to be able to do this. And it came through, making an online fundraiser, but then just continually posting about what we were doing. We made a special little Facebook page for him. It was called Fighting for Ryder back then. And we just started posting everything we were doing for him. And it's not uncommon to make a childhood cancer Facebook page. It's but you don't see a lot of 1-year-olds getting like IV vitamin C infusions and green juice slammed down their feeding tubes and that sort of thing. So it led to a bit of a following. And then and then those folks were amazing. They multiple $1,000 donations from people we'd never met before, and it just kept adding up, and it's really what carried us through. And we weren't afraid to open a credit card or 2 or 5 either.
Right.
But yeah, between all those things, it was kind of, and then the fundraising was kind of like, it was another job in and of itself. We, it's not just like you post something and then you let it go. It was me, like both of us, just sending messages to everyone on our contact lists, like, hey, here's our fundraiser, can you share it? I just set aside a few minutes every night for doing that sort of thing. I guess getting organized in general was like a really big thing for us. We had at first it was just a supplement schedule of like, he was on like 50 different things, and some of them were right before bed and first thing in the morning and empty stomach, with food, without food, all this stuff. And it got to the point where like, we really need to actually get a schedule for this. But then, but then we also wanted to get him outside because we knew that was good. Get him out in the woods because there's all sorts of, the Japanese have all these forest bathing studies, they call it. So, we knew we wanted to do that a few times a week, and we wanted to get him in the sauna and, detox baths and all this stuff. So it was like all this stuff just ended up going on this kind of master schedule. And you'd be amazed what you can get done, especially when you just completely throw out the TV and, it's fun. Like, essentials. Yeah, I was addicted to basically like, checking the news before like going into that. And I think it was like 8 or 9 months later that, the app that I used to check, I'd say, well, maybe I'll see what's going on in the world. And, it was like, it was so out of date from like the updates or whatever, it didn't even work. And it's like, oh, maybe I should,
maybe I should never check again.
Yeah. Yeah. So
yeah, I know that you ended up starting a podcast and you started making a lot of these resources available to other families who might be going through a situation similar to yours. Tell me a little bit about that journey, because I'm sure it was an unexpected part of everything that you ended up dealing with Ryder, but you've been a huge source of inspiration for a lot of families who are facing a similar struggle.
Yeah, and I mean that was kind of the other side of the Facebook page that we started for Ryder very early on. Was one, we knew we needed to put ourselves out there for fundraising purposes, but also, seeing that cart go by in the hospital and with all the candy on it, and we didn't take it, but we were seeing all the other parents partake and their kids getting fed all that just processed isolated sugar that was going directly to feeding the cancer. And so, we also wanted to be putting everything we were finding out there that, maybe it could help some other people. And yeah, that did end up leading to a lot of questions. That ended up leading to a website, and then, a podcast, YouTube channel, its own Facebook page, so on and so forth. So, yeah, it was originally called My Kid Cures Cancer was the website, but it became, politically unwise to continue on with running around with Cures Cancer in your name. So our website has been for a couple of years the Stern method, and our last name Sternagel. Stern is shorter than that and easier to remember. The Stern method, and the podcast is the Integrative Answers to Cancer, and our latest thing, I guess you could say, we did an event last year all around environmental toxicity. It was called the Toxic Home Transformation, because your kid gets born with cancer. Knowing what we know, you get really into making sure you've removed all of that. So that was pretty cool. But this coming up is it's called the Anti-Cancer Revolution, and it's an online conference summit, similar to what you've put on in the past, Misty. But it's all about kind of an integrative approach to cancer, because again, back to that, I kind of informally refer to it as like the truth about cancer meets what you would hear at like a integrative doctors or like an integrative physicians conference. So it's all the alternative treatments and all cancer clinics and all this stuff, all the stuff that we know about that really needs to get out there more, still needs to get into the public consciousness more than it is. Because, I think sometimes in the natural health world, we think everybody knows about this stuff, but there's still a large percentage of the population that doesn't do anything like that when they get diagnosed with cancer. But then on the other hand, I go to a lot of these doctors' conferences, and they're talking about, they're talking about all of that stuff, but then they're also talking about the best ways to naturally mitigate chemo side effects or reduce toxicity, or protecting your healthy cells. How like fasting came up over and over again, protecting your healthy cells while making the cancer cells more vulnerable. Like all these different ways to increase the efficacy and reduce the damage that comes in your body, or alternate dosing strategies, or all this different stuff that because it's not just nobody has all the answers, and there's not one Yeah, there needs to be some sort of a middle ground. I'm kind of tongue-tied today, but back to like what our dilemma was very early on is, I still, after having researched all this stuff 5 years later, I still don't know of anything that would have guaranteed that you know uh, our son's tumor would have been shrunk in time to save him. That wasn't chemotherapy. So there's kind of the idea behind the event is there's a time and a place for everything, and we want to be sure that people really know all of their options from both sides of the spectrum, and then are really making the most educated decision possible,
Right.
no matter where they kind of fall within that spectrum, and progress, one way or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it really appeals to my own sensibilities hearing the way that you hold this conversation as someone who has a bias against dogma. I personally really appreciate the perspective of let's take a look at all the options that are on the table, even the ones that are scary, or even the ones that are from conventional medicine, which many of us in this space have become mistrustful of over the years for a lot of, very well-founded reasons. I'm thinking of a lot of my own experiences early on. But the truth is that cancer is the wild, wild west still. No matter whose play yard you're in. You could be on the conventional medicine playground. You could be in the alternative health playground. It's everything is a bunch of probabilities, and here's what the data tells us, and we don't know for sure how to navigate this. And cancer isn't one of those things that always presents consistently the same way. So I really like the idea of, hey, the stakes are really high here. Instead of letting a bias that you have against one dimension of this conversation, or one person or group of people having this conversation, instead of entertaining your bias against them, let's try to put everything on the table and consider what might be the right thing for the situation that I'm in. So I just am so grateful that you've kind of taken up this mantle and made this your life's work to get the word out and to make sure people know, Ryan, that there's a lot of tools that are available, and everyone needs to kind of step into the driver's seat and be their own advocate on all of this stuff.
Indeed, indeed, yeah. It's been interesting putting this thing together. 'Cause I think when you just step back and think about the holistic or integrative side of approaching cancer, sometimes you can kind of think that everyone over here is on the same team, or has the same, at least somewhat of the same philosophy. But there is definitely the alternative side of the spectrum, and then the more integrative side of the spectrum, and then a lot of those folks don't want to be seen with these folks, and kind of vice versa.
Which
So
doesn't serve the parent like you, who's in a situation where you need to make a decision. And yeah, and what you're dealing with is basically people who have no open-mindedness to anything except their own paradigm, and no guarantee of results either.
yeah, but that being said, I think because of our story and who we are and what we're trying to do, um, we got them all in the same room. So
That's
yeah,
awesome.
it's pretty cool. We're really happy with the way it turned out, and looking forward to getting it out there to the world.
Yeah. Well, thank you for creating this awesome space. I want to invite everyone, if you're watching this on Facebook, in the status, you'll see a link to be able to go sign up for the Anti-Cancer Revolution. And if you're watching on YouTube, it'll be down below. And of course, if you're on the list, I'm going to tell you guys all about it. So just wherever you see where you can sign up, I hope everyone will take the opportunity to participate and get the education that you're probably not going to find anywhere else, especially now when Ryan's making all this available. And, God forbid, if you're in this situation, it's great timing if you're dealing with a loved one who has cancer. And if you're not, it's an even better time for you to participate, so that you've got some good tools in your toolbox should you ever find yourself in the position of caring for someone. God forbid it's you yourself, or maybe someone that who's dealing with a loved one who's having to make these really tough decisions. So thank you so much for your work, Ryan, and for taking a few minutes to tell us all about it today.
Yeah, well, we'll right back at you, Misty. Thanks for what you do, and thanks for the opportunity to get to come on and help spread the word.
Yeah, spread the word. Well, if you know someone that's finds themselves in the situation where this information is going to be timely for them, please share it. And thanks again, Ryan, for coming on. We'll see everybody really soon.
Hi, everybody.
See y'all.